The last time TCU made a coaching change, someone brought the conversation to the public. The Paul Revere of TCU coaching changes is here. Is Moses back from the wilderness with another message? We'll talk about it next here on Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. Subscribe on YouTube, also on your favorite podcast platform. Matt Jennings is with me. If you're watching on YouTube, he's in the box next to me. If you're listening on a podcast, you'll hear his voice shortly. And a few years back, Matt wrote an article. So I think there's like three different phases when it comes to a coach being on the hot seat. The first one is the fans. And I would say we fall into that category a little bit. There's always a subset of fans who really, regardless of what is going on, are like, I want to change at either the head coach level or something on the coaching staff. When things start to go badly, fans are quick to say, hey, let's get rid of this head coach. I am not a reporter. I'm more in the opinion business. So I would say the next phase is people that are in that area of the world are starting to say, okay, there's some real smoke to this, or we're getting to a point where this seems untenable. And then finally, the beat reporters, the people that interact with the coaches on a daily basis. And I said this yesterday, Matt. I was like, when the national media starts realizing that TCU is bad, that always kind of sets off some alarm bells in my mind, because the national media, like by and large, if TCU is struggling, they kind of fly under the radar for the most part. And part of it was Friday night. It was a nationally televised game. But a few years back, Matt wrote an article on Medium about Gary Patterson and it being time to make a change. And it made a lot of waves because Matt's smart and he's a very good writer. And also because nobody was really willing to say that at that time for a number of different reasons. And his name got mentioned in Gary's press conference that week, and a whole lot of other things happened. But eventually, changes took place later that season. You wrote a similar article, even though it was much shorter, about Sonny Dykes, because there's not as much ground to cover here. But I guess, first of all, what made you think this is the time to start kind of broaching that conversation?
I think, and it is different. I think this time, the thing that has stood out, and it's kind of the thesis of the piece, right, is the coming to grips with the fact that there is not a clear direction forward. It not in my eyes, not from what I've seen, certainly over the last month. Because the kind, and you alluded to it on Friday after the game on your live show, of it's the same song over and over and over again. It's the same mistakes. It's the same, crushing turnovers or lack of execution or penalties or, just failing to come through in these key moments. It's the lack of preparation, And it's just the total body of work of Sonny Dykes' tenure after most of Gary Patterson's players were out the door, is there's not a direction. And again, this is kind of the thesis of the piece. People can go, read it if they want to, but essentially I was saying TCU does not have a direction. They don't have an identity. Marshall Newhouse said, put it really well on Monday as well, saying speaking about the defense specifically, that they don't have something to hang their hat on. I mean, he was saying, I don't know what they're about. I don't know what they do. And that's, right, I think, true of the defense. And I think it's true of TCU as a program as a whole. Under Sonny Dykes, they do not have an identity. Mm-hmm. And I think people, and again, to your point, people started writing about this. I was not first. I was first to the party with Gary kind of a little bit. Like, I was the first person who wrote something. I was not first this time. I was not first. Sam Kahn with The Athletic wrote something after the game on Friday. Less about Sonny's job security and more about just like kind of the fall from grace from the college football playoff. Steven Johnson wrote one for the Star Telegram, essentially saying like it looks like Sonny's seat truly is starting to heat up.
Yeah, and that's a big deal. The point I was making earlier, like I say this out of respect for these people and the job that they do.
Mm-hmm.
Steven Johnson talks to Sonny Dykes on a weekly basis.
Yeah.
So like he can only call that shot so many times. He can't every week say, we got to make a change. Like he's got to go talk to that dude. So when he starts saying these things, like, and Sonny understands the game better than most people in this position, I think, but it means that Sonny knows what's up too. Like he understands that there's pressure here. And I do, and we'll talk about this last time I'll say this and we'll talk more about it. Like we understand these are humans involved here, and there's a lot of tentacles to this. Like we're talking about people losing their job and maybe having to move. Like there's a lot of things that go along with this that are difficult and hard, but also like it's kind of the nature of the beast when you're in these positions. But go ahead, Matt. I cut you off there.
And no, you're totally fine, and you're absolutely right. It's a both and thing, right? Of these are real human beings. We shouldn't be flippant, and we shouldn't be dismissive we shouldn't be flippant and dismissive about people's livelihoods. And also, just like any other public figure, just like, a politician who has an elected office, just like, a leader of a large corporation who makes a big salary, whose books are public you, by nature of the position that you're in, you are saying by choosing this profession, I am choosing a profession in which I will be under greater scrutiny, right, and I will have to be held to account to a greater degree than someone who does not make the compensation that I make, who does not wield the power that I do. That is the name of the game. And so it's a both and thing. But to your point, Steven Johnson, you hear people talk about this when coaching search season kind of starts up. Once a coach loses the local beat writers or lose the local columnist, that's kind of when it's really starting. And then when they lose like the moderator or the owner of like the more fan centric site, that's really like the folks who are really like, super plugged in with the boosters and that kind of thing. Yeah. Like those people don't make that move, to your point, unless they're not calling that shot a bunch of times, and they're not going to do so unless they have it on fairly good authority from people with the pocketbooks who are actually going to make the decisions, right? And so that, I think, is what we're seeing a little bit with Sonny is, I would imagine it was very different with Gary, and that's why there wasn't a lot of talk leading up to Gary, at least at first, because he had the respect and the total buy-in of most of the booster base, certainly all the big money boosters, because they only became big money boosters during his tenure. And he had earned so much respect and cachet from the national media that even over those last few years, as things kind of deteriorated, to your point, the spotlight just kind of moved away from TCU, but it wasn't like at an LSU or an Alabama where it's like, no, the spotlight actually gets brighter on you when things aren't going well. That wasn't ever the case at TCU. But now, being the guy who follows up that winningest coach in school history, school legend, and then going to a national championship game, and then having this catastrophic collapse over the ensuing year and a half, that spotlight has stayed to a degree, and it certainly has gotten brighter because people are now because people had a reason to look at you during the national championship game, and then they kept looking for a minute. They're like, oh, what? And then the Colorado game kept them looking a little bit longer, right? And then people have been just, it's a rubbernecking thing almost of like, how in the world did this happen? That was a big part of Khan's piece at The Athletic. And I think what everyone is kind of circling around, and certainly what I was trying to articulate is, again, I don't know that they have an identity and they don't have a direction forward. That's really the thing to me. fans and media can, and again, this was the point of Steven's piece, you can bear difficult times. You can bear adversity. You can say it's fine that we're going through a valley right now as a fan or as a booster or as a neutral third party, and say it's okay that they're at a down part in their cycle. You can say that. You can be totally fine with that if you can see they're going through this valley in the interest of getting to this other point. Like they're going through this down cycle because they're developing young players. They are in this down moment in the program because, but then next year you're able to you're selling them. Next year they're going to be upperclassmen, or they're going to, this key recruits coming in, or whatever. What are you selling fans and media on if you're TCU right now? You're not selling them on the future in terms of players that you're developing. You're not selling them on schematics because people aren't super jazzed about the way either of your coordinators are doing their jobs, certainly on defense. That's absolutely for sure. You're not selling them on recruiting because you haven't elevated your recruiting to the degree that certainly I thought was possible when you initially made this hire. So then what? I said this in the piece. You don't have to be great at everything. No coach is great at everything. No team is great at everything. Mm-hmm. You don't have to be really great at schematics and really great at player development and really great at recruiting and really great at game management. But you've got to be verifiably good at something. You don't have to be great at everything, but you got to be good at something. And right now, Sonny Dykes is having a lot of trouble looking like he's good, that he's giving TCU an edge at anything. And if that's the position you're in, then you're like, then you have people with power and with money asking the question, is this the best we can do?
Yeah, I still feel like you can do this to a certain extent. I think until Friday, if you were selling this particular version of the program and the team, it would be offensively, you can score points and you can sort of stay in games doing that. But you made a good observation at the beginning. And the title of his article is TCU is aimless and Sonny Dykes is answerless. And I had a similar thought when I watched his post-game press conference Friday. And I'll say, I imagine Sonny woke up Saturday and felt differently about stuff and hopefully better. But the end of the Gary era was marred by, or I guess it was just every week there was this defiance of hey, I know what to do.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, people aren't buying in and I'm not able to drag them with me. But I've done this long enough that I know what a successful team looks like. I know what success looks like here. I have the answers. Sonny just looks kind of lost right now. Every week it's like this, and fans have kind of made jokes about it, but it's this idea of, well, I don't know. We practiced well, and I'm not sure why it's not happening in the games. And I said Friday, I was like, the only thing I know about this group is I don't know what to expect. Every week, it's kind of throw up your hands, except for I know they're probably going to get off to a horrible start. That's the only thing I know for sure, is they're going to come out the gate slow, and then it's really about how they recover. But he just felt like somebody who's kind of in over his head. And I would imagine if he could take it back, he would handle that pressure a little bit differently. But I'm not sure he knows what buttons to push and what to do with this team, because it feels like Matt, he's just kind of surprised each and every week.
I think that's absolutely right. And you and I both used that phrase on Saturday, the morning after seeing the full presser. Mm-hmm. We both said, this looks like a guy who's in over his head. This looks like a guy who doesn't know what the answers are. And I said this in the piece as well. I give Sonny some credit for that, in terms of a lot of coaches pretend like they have all the answers. They act like they're the smartest guy in the room. I give Sonny a little bit of credit for being honest. That is, if I were to point to one defining characters of the Sonny era, is honesty and transparency with the media, at least in terms of the way he talks, right? And his media policy, lets media come to practice, which was not the case before under Gary. He's I'm okay with you coming and looking, right? I'm okay with you, and I'm going to give you a pretty honest kind of discernment of the thing. So I give him credit for the honesty. The problem is It may be the honest answer, but if you're in year 3 and your answer is, I don't know what the answer is, that's not a sufficient answer because you're in year 3. This is your program at this point. These are the players that you have identified and recruited and developed. This is your staff that you have hired, and it's doubly so now because they've had quietly, this has not really been a big part of the narrative. They've had a decent bit of attrition on the staff from the very first iteration of his staff since he was announced as TCU's head coach, right? You had a couple assistants who didn't even make it to week 1 of the 22 season because they were hired away. Rashad Samples goes to the Rams. Chidera, the defensive line coach,
D-line coach, like outside linebacker coach. Yep.
And so you have changes that happen even before the season. Then after the national championship run, Garrett Riley goes to Clemson. You make you pull the string on Joe Gillespie last year. Now you've got Andy Avalos in there. I believe they made a change at cornerback coach, like right before the beginning of the season. They got a new running backs coach this year who went off to I believe it was USC. The previous running back coach went to USC, and so you just have time and time again. Like, okay, like now the people that are in the door, like this was your responsibility to make these hires. This was your responsibility to put a staff together that meshed well, that was all rowing in the same direction. And you're the one who made the hires the 2 most problematic positions, I would say, this season on the offensive and defensive lines, and those groups aren't coming through. And again, you're the one who oversaw the staff that identified and recruited and has been trying to develop the players. You have the policy about how much you're going to use the transfer portal and how many of those upperclassmen portal guys are going to get playing time over some of the younger guys who could probably benefit from this. Like, these are all your choices, right?
Yeah.
We're halfway through year 3. Like, this is not, you can't throw your hands up and say, well, Gary left me the cupboard bare. And to Sonny's credit, he's never really done that.
Yeah, he hasn't done that. People have done that for him, but he hasn't done that.
Exactly. But like all this to say, this is your show now. This is your staff. This is your roster. This is your culture. And therefore, these are your results. And so if you don't have an answer for why the results are what they are, or at least a plan to find the answer. And that's the thing for me is like, I can jive with like, hey, like we're really kind of shell shocked after that game, but we're going to figure it out. That's not a way it comes about because this is the 3rd time in 4 games where you've been having that press conference.
When we come back, I'll ask Matt what he thinks is better for the long-term health of the program as far as how the season ends and if there's a way or a win total that Sonny can get to that could save the job. We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. It's time for our Roy Player of the Week. Roy is Return on You. It's the way that you can donate directly to athletes and get involved with NIL as a fan. Our Roy Player of the Week, what a week it is for this thing. I'm going to give it to Abe Kamara, who left the game in the first quarter on a targeting penalty. But you know what? Abe has been the most physical player on defense the last couple of weeks. I understand why they called targeting. I also thought it was pretty cheap. And I feel like that was a big moment in the game. So, Abe, you're our Roy Player of the Week. Roy is the way that you can get directly involved with NIL as a fan. They're bringing fans closer to their schools and athletes with an exciting giveaway. They're giving one lucky fan 2 tickets to any game of their choice in November. Here's how you enter. Just download Roy in the App Store or Google Play. Use the code LOCKEDON when signing up, and you're entered. Already on Roy, make a payment to any athlete's campaign, and you'll be automatically entered. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited. Roy, if you've ever wondered how to get involved with NIL, that's the best place to go. Download it in the App Store or in Google Play today. So, Matt, I ask our fans this question today. I said, as someone who cares about TCU football, what do you think would be better for the long-term health of this program? And I guess this is a 2-part question. I still think that if they can find a way to make a bowl game, which means you win 3 more games and finish up 6-6, that Sonny will get one more run at it in 2025 with a number of returning players and a chance to, see what he can do. So do you think that's true? If they can make a bowl game, do you feel like they won't make any major changes? And then secondly, I guess, what do you think is better right now? If they end up finding a way to make it to 500, or if at the end of the year it's painfully obvious that something needs to move and shake here?
I think it depends on which games you win and the nature of the wins and the nature of the losses, right?
Yeah.
If you can pull off wins against the games that matter to this program and the games that matter to this booster base, so I'm talking Texas Tech and I'm talking Baylor, and maybe you steal one of Utah or Oklahoma State, although Oklahoma State doesn't look that good right now. If those are the 3 wins, then maybe the conversation is a little bit different, because beating Baylor is important to this program. Beating Texas Tech is important, and Utah being kind of one of the favorites in the Big 12. That's a measuring stick kind of game. Oklahoma State, a team, even though they're not good this year, like, that's part of it. But then also it's a matter of the losses too, of like, if you're losing in embarrassing fashion again, if you're losing because if you're getting blown out, like, that's a non-starter. But also if you're losing just because, like, again, you're -4 in turnover margin again, or you got a chance in the 2-minute drill and you go 3 and out, or your defense needs to stop right here and you can get the ball back and got a chance to go win, and then you give up a 70-yard touchdown. Like, those things can't keep happening with the level of frequency that they're happening right now. And so I think that's what maybe if you get to 6 wins and even in the losses you're showing tangible improvement, you're not just getting embarrassed, then I think possibly. But to me, again, part of the reason I wrote the piece was just like, there's no evidence for me right now that this team has those answers to make those improvements to get to that point. So it's me, I think, to get to the root of your question, which is like, what's better long term? Again, I'm out on Sonny at this point. That's me personally. I can't square keeping him after the season, barring you getting like 8 or 9 wins, like, which would be a truly
that'd be a heck of a turnaround,
right? Like, if you get to 8 or 9 wins, you've gone 5-1 or 6-0 down the stretch, then yes, absolutely. Like, I will eat the crow. I'll tear up the piece. I'll do the whole thing. Great. And people can tell me that I was way too early, or and tell me that I was wrong, and they would be right. They would 100% be right. But to me, I think, stealing a couple wins against a bad Baylor team, against an uneven Oklahoma State, or an uneven Arizona, or a Utah without Cam Rising, even I'm not sure stealing 2 of those games, 3 of those games makes you feel any crazy different about the state of this team. I think what they need is a change in direction, a change in culture right now. As someone who's going to instill a mentally and physically tougher culture, a regime with a better plan in terms of acquiring and developing and retaining players. Because right now I don't know what their plan is for putting their roster and putting their starting 22 out there. It seems like it's all just plugging holes with transfers is what it feels like right now. And I think that's what you need. I think you need a change in direction in terms of culture, in terms of roster management. Schematically, quite frankly, I'm kind of agnostic at this point. I think you're asking for winning culture and player acquisition and player development first before you're worrying about the X's and O's of it all, because you made an X's and O's hire, at least to a degree, with Sonny, in that you were like, we had a defensive guy and the offense was really frustrating late. We got to go with an offensive guy, and you got your offense for a year, and now things have really come apart at the seams, right? I think what's more important is, again, to your question of long-term future, you're finding someone who has a history and a proven track record of winning, or a plan that you think is sustainable for winning in kind of the new world of college football?
The things that would give me pause, and I mean, I can still see them. I get it. Everybody's out on it. And I'm not saying this is going to happen. I still see a world where they scrape together a few more wins here. But the things that would give me pause, I'm not saying you make the decision based on this, but I'm not the one making the decision, so I can say it. I really like Josh Hoover. He was bad Friday night. I get it. But I like what he brings to the table. I know he's limited with his athleticism. I would just love to see another year of him.
Yeah.
If I can guarantee another year that I got him leading the offense with some returning players, that's great. I also really like this 2025 class, and they set it up. I know, Andy Avalos, I'm not loving the results right now, but he did recruit a number of kind of explosive edge guys, like Chad Woodfork, like Keelan Abrams, like Jared Martin, who seem to fit the priority of his defense. But I understand, one, most of those guys aren't going to play next year, and they don't have a great track record developing players. So it's a tough sell.
Well, and here's the thing. Let's set aside the firing, the possibility of the fire everybody track that we seem like TCU might be barreling down at this point. But let's set that aside for a second. If Sonny does make it through the year, people are going to be antsy about this. I don't think that if they make it to the end of the year and they manage to stave off, the Reaper for one more season, I don't think they're making coordinator changes.
No, you can't. Reasons. I mean, you can, but you've played that card multiple times already.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and admittedly, in fairness to Sonny, the first time on offense was not his choice because Garrett Riley chose to go to Clemson. He thought it was a better opportunity for him, and first year for him at Clemson didn't go so well. But right now, he's looking like he's going to be a pretty sought after candidate for some jobs here in this cycle. Given the results at Clemson after the Georgia game, the results at Clemson turning in on offense pretty great. So kudos to Garrett and what they're doing there. But it wasn't Sonny's choice then. He could ostensibly, make a move on from Kendall and make it would be his first time electing to cut the cord voluntarily. But the reason I say you can't, yes, you're right. You've played your card. You've kind of used that excuse. I think the other reason is you're put in a really difficult position in terms of who you try and hire, because if you fire either or both of your offensive and your defensive coordinator, whoever you're interviewing for those openings know that they are getting on what is potentially a sinking ship. And so your candidate pool is going to be limited to people who don't have a lot of other options. Yeah. And so then that kind of ruins it for you. And for Avalos, in his defense, as best you can, his phenomenal defenses at Oregon were populated by these top 15 recruiting classes at Oregon. And I've said this before, I think he is really struggling right now. He's calling a defense as if he has that level of athlete all over the field and down the depth chart, and he does not. He doesn't, for a myriad of reasons. And if but the level, to your point, the level of recruiting that he is putting in and that this defensive staff is putting in give you some hope for the future. And so that's what you sell it on, is you keep Avalos around on the promise of, with another year of development and with that 25 class coming in, you will be faster, bigger, more talented, more athletic at all your different positions. And hopefully you'll be healthier in the back end of the defense after having some injuries that have really set you back in the secondary. And then you say now the narrative, the messaging you put out is, well, now Avalos can really call the defense the way that he wants to. And get the results with that style that you thought you were going to get. So that's the messaging. That's the argument that you put forth. You got to make it to the end of the season, though. You got to make it to the end of the season with your head coach still with his job, which is not the track that you appear to be on as of, October 6th, 7th.
No, they're not making a move at coordinator. I mean, I think they wouldn't make a move from Kendall unless the offense just went in the tank over the next 6 weeks. And there was a story last offseason that Dave Aranda, before the West Virginia game, went and basically made like a Shark Tank pitch to Mac Rhodes about, hey, let me have one more go at this. And his idea was, okay, I'll make a change. Like, I'll take over the defensive play calling. I'll can my offense coordinator, go find somebody else. If Sonny's selling like, this is why I deserve more time, the sell is, I just need more continuity with these people that I brought on. So year 2 with my DC. And we'll take a quick break, and then I'll tell you why. I'll tell you my biggest concern for this team moving forward here on Locked On Horned Frogs. It's your team every day. FanDuel. It's where the game starts. Go to FanDuel.com or download the FanDuel app. One $5 bet gets you $200 in bonus bets. One $5 bet, $200 in bonus bets. That's great return on your investment. NFL games, college football games, Major League Baseball playoffs, whatever you fancy. FanDuel is here to help. FanDuel.com or the FanDuel app. FanDuel, official betting partner of the NFL. Okay, final thing I'll say about this, and then I'll tell my people that I'm not going to talk about changing the coaching staff for the rest of the year because that would not be super entertaining. But I'll talk about it more. I'm just not going to talk about it every day. I do think part of the issue here is personnel, right? Like, you don't have all the pieces you need, especially up front, to be a good football team. My issue is you could sell me on the idea of, we just need more talented players if the team was playing clean football every week. Like, if they were not being penalized, not making a lot of mental mistakes, not turning the ball over, and they were losing by, close margins, and it was just like, man, we just need some more horses, right? Like, we just need some more dudes who can go. We just need more speed, or physicality, or power. And once we get those dudes in-house, we're going to be ready to rock and roll. But it's a twofold issue. One is it doesn't seem like you're evaluating super well in the portal. Or, like, you just don't have the resources. But, I mean, from all accounts, that doesn't seem totally true. But it doesn't seem like you're evaluating super well in the portal. And it doesn't feel like you have a team that is really disciplined and ready to roll. You just need to raise the talent ceiling to compete. And I think Jeff Mitchell mentioned this, and he covers the Frogs for Horned Frog Blitz. In the Big 12, I'm not sure you're going to have somebody, maybe with the exception of Dion, who's going to be able to recruit at such a high level, Matt, that like the talent just overwhelms everybody else.
Yeah.
The way to succeed here is probably going to be more like you need somebody who can evaluate and develop. Like, they can see this person's going to be good. They're just not getting enough attention because of X, Y, Z, and I can help them fit into my system, and then we can move forward. And I just don't think Sonny's that type of coach. Like, I don't even feel like at his best, that's what he's been known for. And so I don't really see like the vision right now.
I would agree. You know what everyone's going to say? You know what the irony of what you just said is? You know who that sounds like?
Gary Patterson? Yeah.
It sounds like Gary Patterson.
Sounds like Gary
and
Patterson.
To your point, Gary had a lot of teams late. They had some embarrassing losses, like, as well. Like, do not get me wrong, but they had some teams in those later years where it's just like they just couldn't get over the hump. But they could keep it close. They could keep it respectable against, they lost a bunch of games, but they were nice and respectable losses, right? And it was a lot of exactly what you're talking about, of like they were, recruiting and evaluating, and even the fluke. They had a few blue chip guys, but those guys were kind of like accent pieces on a larger, structure, a larger machine of, player development. And they were generally pretty disciplined and weren't like super mistake prone. At least not as catastrophically as this iteration of TCU is, right? And so I do think that's a little bit of irony. I think TCU fans, are yearning for that a little bit. They're yearning for a level of consistency that they're not getting right now. I think what you bring up is a good point. Here's the thing: we're making a lot of sweeping proclamations, or I am at least, a lot of inferences about the quality of the overall roster, because a lot of these players from the 23 and 24 recruiting classes have not gotten on the field. And you want to talk about like the question you posed earlier of like, what does it take for Sonny to kind of salvage the season and get and get a chance to stay on for 2025, and what hope can you sell? Honestly, like, go youth movement. This is a bye week. This is your opportunity. They've started doing a little bit of this. They've done a little bit more rotating the offensive line. You saw Jeremy Payne get some more reps at running back in the last couple of weeks. Marcus Deal has gotten on the field more on the defensive line. But to your point that you made a minute ago, they're sticking with all these veteran players and a lot of transfer guys, but those guys are not delivering. And so, and those guys are still the ones also making the mental mistakes, also making the dumb penalties. Also, it's not that they're just, to your point, they're like these really reliable, pieces that execute at a high level. They just don't have the athleticism or the talent or whatever. Like, no, like they're not executing either. So if that's the case, put your higher upside players out there who are also going to make mistakes, but that might be able to make up for it with a greater degree of speed, talent, strength, athleticism. That to me is your path forward here as you enter your bye week. Give those guys a bunch more reps with the ones here in practice. Build your game plans, simplify them so that you can get your young guys out there and play fast and see what your results are. Because you're not going out there with this group as currently constructed, and you're not getting a win in Salt Lake. You're not coming home and beating a Texas Tech team that like we laughed at in the first couple weeks of the season and is quietly like gonna probably be a top 15 team when they come into Fort Worth, barring anything crazy over the next couple weeks. I just totally jinxed them, and that was not intentional. That's not like I'm being serious. Like they've been good. Their offenses look great.
I will intentionally jinx them. I think they're going to run the table. I'll jinx them so hard.
But like barring that, but like you're not beating this version of Texas Tech with this version of TCU. Not right now, right? And even Baylor, who looks bad. Did Baylor look worse than Houston? Does Baylor right now look worse than Houston did coming into the game that they just kicked your butt in? No, not in my opinion. And so as your current structure, your current plan, your current way of doing things with this lineup, this starting group, not working. So like that to me is because people are, then you can make the argument of no, see our identification and development is working because here are these young players out here and they're going to help us win some more games. That's your path forward. If I were to pitch one. And so I'll be very curious to see if that's the route you take. If you see some more young players out there in the secondary, on the defensive and offensive line, even at receiver, I like their top three receivers are upperclassmen. Besh and Richardson and Williams have all been great, but they're getting nothing from the rest of the group. Put Jordan Bailey, put Major Everhart, put Kyle Baker out there and like see what happens. See if you can get some juice out there, because my Lord, like it's not sustainable. Simplify your game plan, go youth movement, and see if that moves the needle for you at all. Because that to me, again, seems like the path forward for you if you want to keep your job into 25.
I think that's a good thought. I feel like they're not going to do it until they're really out of bowl contention, but that might be too late. But yeah,
is your back not against the wall right now? Like that's the thing to me is if you're worried about.
No, I agree with you. I just knowing how they roll, like or how they have in the past, I just don't feel like they will. But maybe I'm wrong. I've been wrong before. a couple times.
I'm
glad we solved everything. I'm glad that in these 40 minutes we got it all figured out.
There we go.
Yeah, I want to see Braylon James. I mean, I'd love to see him get some snaps at receiver. But anyway, bye week. Thank you, Matt. Appreciate you always. We'll see what they do against Utah. 9:30 p.m. kick against the Utes in a couple Saturdays. We'll be back tomorrow. It's Locked On Horned Frogs. It's your team. We do it here every day. We're free and available wherever it is you get your podcast.